Okay. Okay. A great Friday afternoon, everybody. Once again, kaya nga nang sinabi natin, it's Friday. And when it's Friday, alam naman natin, it is once again, Kwentuhang Cybersecurity time. I am Executive Director Arlene, and for today, ako po muna ang tatao sa ating weekly episode of Kwentuhang Cybersecurity. So for now, while waiting for the others, I would like to, of course, to give the biggest shout out to our avid followers. Maraming salamat sa constantly sa inyong palaging pagsama sa amin every Friday, not actually every Friday lang, but every projects, every programs that we have, lagi nyo kaming sinasamahan. So hopefully as we go along to this quarter, samahan niyo pa rin po kami sa ating Kwentuhang Cybersecurity and all the other efforts of your PICSPro Barkada. So let's just wait. Okay, good afternoon ka PICSPro. Hi, Sir Harold Agomaan from Pateros, I believe. Taga Pateros po ako, by the way. I am from Pateros as well. Isang magandang hapon sa inyo. And by the way, we are being joined here by the pretty Miss Bats Carbonell of Infoblox. Hi, ma'am. Kamusta?
Hello po. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon
sa mga ka-PICSPro. Good afternoon.
Yes. And of course, our speaker for today is no stranger to PICSPro. In fact, the first offering of Infoblox for KC this year was opened by no less than Sir Ganesh Bikram. So, sir, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Having you here again at PICSPro at Kwentuhang Cybersecurity. Hopefully, with our trainings as well, Infoblox would be there to collaborate with us. Yes. And also, I think Miss Christina Chow is here as well. Hi, Miss Christina.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm the field marketing manager. Yeah, thanks for the PICSPro and also representing Infoblox to thanks for everyone joining.
So very worldwide ang PICSPro because we're being supported not just by the Philippine team of Infoblox but all over its global operation. So very supportive sa atin and to our advocacy ang Infoblox. So going back to our viewers before we officially start our episode for today. So Jason Subong, good afternoon, watching from Calinog, Iloilo. Oh, good afternoon sa iyo, ka-PICSPro. Paul Balaguer, good afternoon, ka-PICSPro. Hi, Sir Paul. Okay, continue liking, sharing, and following our page as well as the Infoblox page. You have your social media as well, correct, Miss Bads? So, kung paano yung sinusuportahan ng PICSPro, supportahan din po natin ng Infoblox sa kanilang social media. And then later may surprise ata kayo eh. Marami pong pasabog ang Infoblox.
Yes.
Ang opening ng training namin si Infoblox. O ngayon meron na naman sila. Ma'am, may susunod pa.
Yeah, marami pa.
Marami pa. Actually, for those who are asking about our training, so far ma'am, for the knowledge of Infoblox as well as the other members of the audience na interesado, we are currently doing the PICSPro Certified Cybersecurity Professionals Professional Program. So we have our first batch, which is from Bacolod. So may mga kasunod pa po yun. So ang aming mga tech partners like Infoblox, we actually partner with them in terms of training so that we will get these students certified. So by the time na sila po ay graduate na from their colleges and universities, equipped na sila with the necessary expertise, necessary skills required to become a cybersecurity professional. So hopefully Infoblox would be aboard on the second and the third batch as well.
Yeah, definitely we're here to support PICSPro.
Always, ma'am, kasi kayo nag-open. Kaya talagang very, naging maganda yung simula ng PICSPro. Si Infoblox ay all the way tinulungan din kami. So, Makoy Maki, good afternoon. Good afternoon sa inyo. Good afternoon, by the way, to our board of directors as well. Mr. Chair, unfortunately, due to some conflict of schedule, we were not able to, they were not able to join us. Pero hindi naman ibig sabihin na hindi pa rin nakasuporta sa atin ng ating board and national officers. Lagi silang nandyan, nakamonitor, ready to answer all our inquiries and questions. So, another one, Jersey Mix, security personnel from Cebu. Sarap po magsubaybay, may natututunan po talaga ako. Wow naman. Ang sarap naman pakinggan. Nakakatuwa kasi when we started the KC, one of the things that we want to dispel, syempre, to the audience and to those who are interested in pursuing career in cybersecurity is that anyone can become a cybersecurity professional. But do you have what it takes? Yes, you have. As long as may interest ka, and as long as you have the drive to continue from that interest. So itong panonood ng KC is step one from what you from that particular goal in pursuing a career, pursuing a life, pursuing a path in cybersecurity. So hopefully nakakatulong tayo. And salamat because we have partners like, of course, Infoblox na kasama natin palagi para bigyang linaw yung mga konsepto sa cybersecurity na, for example, I do not know. So coming from a person who does not have a background, industry background in cybersecurity, malaking tulong na lumalapit sa atin yung mga industry partners, technology partners natin to explain those concepts na mas naiintindihan natin ngayon because of Kwentuhang Cybersecurity. Salamat po. 3 weeks na ako nag-wait, Sir Nan. Ay, wow, 3 weeks na siyang nag-wait. Okay, thank you naman. Kasi ibig sabihin hindi kayo, lagi kayong nasasabik sa mga episodes natin. Hello mga ka-PICSPro. Hi, VP Sheila. Press Reese, magandang hapon mga ka-PICSPro. Okay. Hi, Press Reese, VP Sheep. From Carmelo HDRT, good PM po, watching from the provincial government of Sorsogon City. Wow, nakakatuwa naman, nakakarating tayo sa iba't ibang region. So hopefully, Sorsogon, magkaroon tayo ng chapter dyan sa Bicol. We are waiting kung sino man po ang may magkakaroon ng lakas ng loob na simula ng ating advocacy dyan. What are the minimum requirements for someone to learn or get training po? We will get there po. Don't worry, we will have hopefully an episode about that. So we have our viewers are growing. The number of viewers are growing. I guess excited na sila to hear it from Sir Ganesh Vikram and how he will discuss to us about DNS. And what should we learn about it? What concepts should we learn about it? And how best can we secure our systems, our network, especially our DNS? So I will give the floor now to the team Infoblox to give us our Kwentuhang Cybersecurity episode for this Friday. Take it away po.
Thank you. Let me know if you guys can see my screen in presentation mode. It's good.
Yep, it's clear. Yep.
All right. So good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Ganesh Vikram. I'm the product security specialist at Infoblox, and thank you for having me again. I think I'm excited to be here. And for today's topic this evening, what I want to share with you is how we can use DNS detection response to provide, detection at the early stage of the life cycle, how we can use those data to prevent those threats. And most importantly, I think DNS is always seen as a networking tool. So how we can use those to enable and power our security operation as well, to provide them to have more information and context and visibility. All right. So before I just jump in, I just want to give you some idea, context, and trends that we see, globally from our customers and what we see across the globe. The business challenges in terms of network demand have shifted. How it was 2 years ago, how it was 5 years ago, and 10 years ago has completely have changed. And we are seeing a lot more, business are distributed. All right. And they rely on multi-cloud strategy and SaaS solution to stay competitive. All right. And we see a lot of organizations now adopting cloud, not just one particular cloud, whether it's AWS, GCP, or Azure. And they're using a lot of software applications. So this is where it kind of getting a bit more complicated and challenging. And especially we do see a lot of reliance on IoT and OT devices. In the past, these devices are primarily designed to work in isolated environment. But today you can see these devices require some form of connectivity to the management console, whether in the cloud or whether over a network. So this is where it kind of expand or rather open up exposure to cyber risk. All right. And this also releasing constraint to the security operation team. All right. And one of the things that we often hear from our customers and what we see as well is there are many security tools that have been used. And one of the challenges, or rather the strain, basically these tools, they don't have integration, and then lack of automation as well. So a lot of processes are done manually, which requires a lot of resources, staff to manage all these different type of incident, and this is basically causing a lot of strain on the security operation team. And from the same report from the IBM data breach report, which was published last year, we also noticed something that few interesting data point was the in terms of the average cost of data breach continue to rise. I think about 2 years ago, it was around about 2.5 million. Now we are looking at about 4 million. This is what you see globally in terms of average of cost data breach, and it will continue to rise up to about 10 million, I think, in the next 2 to 3 years. And the other interesting point that we also see is basically in terms of the average time to identify and contain a threat or malware within your environment. That takes about 270 days. That means today, if there's a malware comes into a network, it probably take about another 270 days before you can detect and basically to contain those threats as well. So this number is huge. And this is basically causing a lot of challenges to businesses to manage these different type of threats as well. Okay. So before I go into the content today, I just want to kind of throw a question to the audience today is basically have a think if you come from a security background, or rather if you come from networking background, or even if you're new to cybersecurity, I think about what is the most precious resource we have during a security incident. All right. I think for everybody would agree with me, time is one of the most important part when it comes to a security incident. And this actually, I think, used as a metrics in many organizations in terms to evaluate or or rather to track how much time they take to do a containment. The dwell time, as I mentioned, the previous slide was 270 days. How can we actually detect a threat and how do we contain that within the shortened dwell time? And one of the most important KPI as well, we have seen like mean time to detection and mean time to resolution. And this actually a very key important metrics in terms like when it comes to security incidents. So the next maybe 30 minutes, I'll probably share with you how Infoblox can help on these areas as well. And so let's take a look in terms of how DNS plays a very important role in security. All right. And one thing you can see today, DNS actually spans the entire organization, right? And you can see DNS is the only layer that's universal. Whether if you're on the cloud, multi-cloud strategy, whether you're using a software as a service, whether you're using your managed devices or unmanaged devices, whether it's the IoT devices, everything on the network needs DNS to connect, right? And secondly, you can see DNS actually has a rich source of telemetry because it has information on which user devices accessing to which resources at any given point of time, and also provide some historical data as well. So this is where it becomes very important as well, right? And lastly, you can see DNS actually is closer to the endpoint, right? So because this is the first hop from an end host before it does anything, whether if you're accessing to a website, whether you're sending an email or accessing application, you have to go to the DNS server before you're accessing to those resources, all right? So you can see DNS plays a very important part. It has a lot of information that it requires, all right? And oftentimes we can see most of the organizations use DNS usually in a post-investigation, right? So this is where we kind of advocating to customer how we can use DNS into your existing security framework or existing security strategy and how to provide this information, all right? So let's look at some of the fun facts. I think when it comes to DNS, today we have over about 1 billion domain inside the DNS. And we at Infoblox itself, we see close to about 200,000 new domains being created every single day. And from Infoblox perspective, I mean, from the data that we get from our customer, we actually review close to 70 billion, all right, DNS query per day, all right. And we actually have the average of, one of the things you can see, average PC actually does about 3,000 DNS queries per day. So that's actually quite a number of DNS query come from single devices as well. So the concept of protected DNS is basically how you can turn in a standard DNS server into a security control using threat intelligence, using machine learning analytics, and a policy engine to control that. So let me just give you some breakdown here as well, right? Today, almost every organization today has a DNS server. All right. So without a DNS server, basically you have no access to resources. So almost every organization you already have a DNS server. And if you look at it, DNS server has been around close to 40 years, all right? And fundamentally, when it was designed, it was supposed to provide a resolution, all right, from a domain to an IP address. And historically, it was, it's a services that's supposed to provide a connectivity to resources over the internet, over IP networks. And at that point of time, I think security was the first consideration. Security wasn't a priority. So basically DNS is, technically does providing all these services of the connectivity. And one of the things that we have seen over the years basically is a lot of threat actors actually start capitalizing or start using DNS server as a mean for running a campaign. For example, phishing campaign, setting up a C2 infrastructure, running a malware. So basically this is where it becomes a popular choice. All right. In fact, today, if you look at the numbers, 92% of malware actually uses DNS, actually done via DNS server. All right. So this is where DNS servers plays a very important role to provide those information, and then basically allows us to have the capability in order to provide the protection. So here at the Infoblox, we have a solution we call Blox One Threat Defense. So this is the solution that we provide. So basically, as I mentioned, we review close to about 70 million requests per day. And based on that data, what we do here is basically we have a threat intelligence team that actually review all these different type of anomalies, different type of threats, and basically we put them into different type of category. For example, like suspicious domain, malicious domain, and some other different type of fits. And essentially, this threat intelligence is something that they share to our customer. And essentially, you can use this threat intelligence to stop something is bad. For example, today, if I know a user going to a bad website, and we can actually use this threat intelligence to stop it before they're actually accessing to the website. All right. And what is interesting as well, what we have learned as well, threat intelligence itself is not sufficient, all right, to protect against some of the zero-day campaign or zero-day. Typically, you see a lot of zero-day campaign will use the C2 infrastructure or DNS infrastructure. Typically, this is not sufficient because it's not known to the vendor. So this is where we can start leveraging, machine learning and AI, artificial intelligence analytics, essentially to help us to provide some predictive analysis. All right. So this is where using this AI and machine learning can help us to look something that have suspicious behavior, some anomalies, to look at the destination and host, and essentially they can provide us an alarm. So basically, hey, look, and this user going to somewhere looks suspicious. Maybe we should stop it first, and then basically assign to look into the particular connection in much more detail, right? So this is where it allows us to be a bit more proactive, all right? And I will show you some example later in my later slide in terms of how this machine learning and AI can help us to kind of stop threat before the attack happens, all right? And of course, having all this intelligence and analytics, we also have the capability to provide enforcement. So this is where a protective DNS, not just a server that provides resolution, but you can actually use DNS server to provide protection and enforcement as well. So today we have some capabilities, to our policy whereby if someone going to somewhere suspicious or someone, you can see something that's not right, a connection going to a C2 infrastructure in Russia or North Korea, this is where we can actually have a policy to block those before the cause further damage to the environment. So this is where the concept of protected DNS, essentially what we do here is to use existing DNS server, all right, and basically turning them into a protective DNS to essentially to able to provide those intelligence, all right. And why this is important, because if you look at it, DNS is widely used in all the organization, and it's basically, it doesn't require any architecture. All right, we are just leveraging your existing infrastructure, and basically we're just adding threat intelligence, we're just adding our machine learning capability to provide you that context and visibility. All right. All right, so let's look at some of the example. I think in terms of the how protecting DNS plays a very important part. As I mentioned earlier, that's the easiest way to implement because DNS doesn't really require any re-architecture because you're already using a DNS. So basically, we are just using your existing infrastructure, existing DNS infrastructure, and we are just adding additional capability such as intelligence and analytics, right? And one of the biggest benefit that we have seen with our customers basically is the ability when you have a protective DNS, we can stop threat at the very early stage of the cycle. All right, basically we can reduce 92% of malicious requests at the very early stage before it reaches to any other security devices within the security stack. All right. One way I ask what is the key benefit? Obviously, if we can stop threat at a very early stage, that basically offload a lot of downstream, offload a lot of resources from your downstream security devices. All right. And today, without a protected DNS, a lot of organization actually does this protection maybe at the next-gen firewall, maybe at the secure gateway. And one of the challenges we see here is basically those resources are very expensive. For example, a firewall is it can do a lot of things, and it's also a very expensive resources. Imagine if you can actually offload all this threat detection using a DNS server. That actually gives up a lot of offload a lot of downstream, a lot of resources from your firewall. Basically, you can repurpose the firewall to do more things. For example, DPI or SSL decryption. So basically, you have more capabilities. So essentially, all this threat can be stopped there as well. And the second benefit we see using protective DNS is basically we can track the adversary very much earlier. As I mentioned, if you can block this thing at a very early stage, that kind of help us all the other security devices to function more effectively, right? So imagine if you can block most of the threat at a very early stage, anything that pass through the DNS goes to firewall, goes to APT solution, or goes to a secure gateway, those are real legitimate incidents. Because one of the challenges we have seen with this old model without having protected DNS is most of these requests will go through firewall. You see one incident, it goes through APT, one incident, it goes to a secure gateway, one incident, and go through endpoint devices, another incident. By the time you see all this incident comes to your SIM solution, basically you have 10 different incidents which correlate to the same incident as well. So this is where you are actually reviewing a lot of logs, a lot of incidents basically related to the same incident, right? So imagine if you can actually block this at a very early stage, that basically empowers all your security devices to work more effectively in that sense, all right? So let's look at some of the examples actually uses DNS. So in this case, basically, I have two examples. One is the ransomware called Diabo. And as you can see on the slide here, the different type of tactics planning is being used. If you're familiar with MITRE attack, I think the TTP. So basically, there are different type of stages how this ransomware works. It started with creating the ID, doing initialization. You can see a C2 communication. And essentially what it does after that is try to look for certain processes to kill it. And then you basically initialize encryption, find a certain drive, and then basically prevent recovery to disable some of the capabilities within the endpoint. And lastly, basically to encrypt the file and kind of do the extraction, right? And this is a situation whereby if you have a DNS detection response, how would you make a difference? So this is where you can see we can actually stop the threat at a very early stage. So if you have a DNS detection response, the capability of threat analytics, the machine learning and AI, we can actually stop the threat at a very early stage when the malware tries to make a CN2 communication. So this is where some of the benefit that we can see in terms of stopping that. That doesn't require for the malware to go to initialization. It doesn't require to go through encryption. So we can stop all these things before it proceeds to the next stage. All right. Similarly, for the next example I have is Viper's SoftX. And this is a bit interesting because this is actually using a two-stage of the attack. Basically, the first stage is basically sends a shellcode, all right? And then essentially what it does is once the shellcode has been executed, is kind of looking for, if it's running on a sandboxing environment or running on a VM. So basically just to evade the detection. So if those environment, it will not execute. But if it actually runs on a machine, basically once you execute, and it does download the second stage PowerShell, basically it's just a payload, basically, and then once it's successfully executed, and it will start to download the second stage of PowerShell, and that PowerShell essentially will execute in that environment, and this is where the final objective is basically to either to send a data or do a data exfiltration, right? And similarly, if you have a DNS detection response, I think this is where the value we can add. So essentially, you can look at it, we can stop at many stages, the very initial stages before, it loads to the second PowerShell, or even before it actually sends the data to the CNT server. So this is where you can see DNS detection response plays a very important part in threat detection. So basically, we can stop threats at a very early stage before it goes to the to the process where they start stealing data and to execute all these payloads. All right, so let's shifting gears a bit. I think we're gonna talk about some of the key capabilities, how we can use DNS to detect and block threats. So there are a few kind of a capability as a specialized DNS-based security vendor. I think Infoblox actually tracks adversary infrastructure, and we review all these DNS logs to see suspicious activity at a very early stage of the life cycle, right? Where the intent is to compromise and before the attack happens. All right, so this is where it's very important to understand. I think there's intent basically to compromise, but before the attack happens, as an example that I showed earlier, before you start to encrypt the data, before you start initialization, we can actually stop the adversary. All right, so this is where the threat hunting in a DNS helps, to identify all these different type of domains, persistent threat before other security solution does, right? Some of the capabilities I have, I just will quickly cover this and I'll speak a bit more in the next few slides. We have what we call lookalike domains. So this is very interesting, whereby it tries to mimic or try to copy your URL that looks like your digital asset. So you look like a website. So basically, just typically this is used for phishing campaign to the users or even for customers that in a pretext of going to the actual website, basically to steal credential. All right, and then we also have domain generation algorithms. So this is what we call a technique, to create large amount of complex domain registered by the attacker, used to establish a start communication. So the idea is basically I can create thousands of domains and essentially just kind of to evade the detection and basically use this domain for a few minutes and then keep changing and rotating. And how they create this domain basically using different type of algorithm that are actually known to the attackers. All right. And we also seen a lot of cases, for the last few years that DNS actually used for data exfiltration and also for malware infiltration. All right. So today we can see attackers actually can steal data. All right, using DNS protocol. All right, basically the idea is take the data and cut into a small chunk, and essentially using DNS query to send this data out to attacker servers. And basically, once all the data has been sent, they reassemble the data, and then basically they have successfully steal the data. All right. And lastly, we also have what we call suspicious domain. So this is a very unique proposition from an Infoblox perspective, whereby we can track the adversary before it becomes malicious. All right. And in fact, there are some use cases I will share later, and essentially, how be able to provide early detection, all right, early prevention before actual attack happens. All right. So let's look at some of the details here again. I think in terms of the suspicious domain, I think this is one of the unique proposition or unique value that we provide to our customers. So again, like as I mentioned, we have customers across the globe. So we see close to about 70 billion queries a daily. And one of the things we do with this data is basically it's the big data, right? So we see a lot of data comes in. So we use algorithms. So we have a threat research team that sits across the globe, essentially to analyze all this data and to put different type of data that we see into a few categories. All right. Some of the feeds that we recently have introduced, we have added into our existing threat feeds, basically what we call suspicious lookalike that look like a website, newly observed emerging domain, and suspicious domain. So these are some of the feeds you can see from the screen. Basically, we have a few other feeds as well. So essentially, the suspicious domain is what we call before they become malicious. All right. So for malicious domain, you pretty much it's malicious, so you will block the access. But a lot of time in a campaign whereby whether it's a zero-day attack or zero-day vulnerability, typically this attacker will use a C2 infrastructure. We use the DNS infrastructure as a C2 where they can do a C2 communication. So typically when they set up this infrastructure, we have the visibility. We know when this website is created, and we actually track every thread of the life cycle. So at the point of when created, it could be suspicious, it's not malicious. So this is where we start tracking all these things. So in the event they become malicious, we can actually help the customer to block it as well. All right. Lookalike domain protection. I think, as I mentioned earlier, so this is where attacker try to mimic or try to copy the brand, in terms of brand reputation or your digital asset that looks like yours or looks like your website, essentially to trick the user. All right, whether it's for phishing campaign or for spear phishing. In fact, we have seen some of the example where I'll share it later. Whereby to trick the users to provide all this information. And as you can see, this is where we can actually track different type of domains, or whether that looks like yours. And we also see some campaign where brand reputation, where we can also help to protect our customers, because we have seen, for example, a threat actor probably set up a website that's similar to yours, essentially to trick the customers to go to the website and providing all this information. So this is where we also offer what we call a takedown service. So if we feel this particular website it's misleading or trying to impersonate you to get a customer data, or try to trick the users or the customers. So basically, you can actually contact us. We can get the registrar to take down this domain as well. All right. And I can see some of the mitigation as well, whether we can take down this particular website. We can also try to block it. So if you have intelligence, some of these domains that is risky or that looks like a suspicious domain, we can actually block it as well. And everyone's the target, even for Infoblox. And as you can see, we see close to about 25,000 suspicious domain lookalike every month. So this is also, it's a problem for everybody. So this is where we can see different type of threats, different type of, ways how to do that. Some are using homograph, basically using a lowercase and uppercase, try to impersonate Infoblox website. We've seen typo squad, top level domain squad. This is basically a different type of level domain. And then we also see a combo squad, basically lookalike with the on-prem product. Basically, we have a product called Grid. All right. So basically, they're just using this kind of advantage to provide those information. All right. And you can see this plays a very important part. So when you have all this information, all this data, that allows us to protect our customers as well. So from going to all these different type of lookalike domains or phishing email that looks like our brand reputation, so we can actually help our customers from going to these bad websites as well. Okay. So just to give you some examples, I think in terms of how DNS threat detection plays a very important part. I think I'm not too sure if most of you are familiar with some of the Octopus and Coinbase hack that happened recently, I think in January this year. All right, whereby employees were tricked to go to a multi-factor authentication website that looks like the company multi-factor authentication website. They actually put in credential, but actually this is a lookalike a domain, all right? And then essentially that's how the attacker managed to steal the credential and do the privilege escalation, persistent threat, and then basically able to hack into the Coinbase environment, all right? And one of the interesting fact here is basically you can see from the Infoblox threat intelligence group, we actually found all these URLs been malicious since last year. All right, since even January 2002, before the attack was actually publicly was announced, we actually able to track, because from the point the domain was created, we already start tracking different type of life cycles. So when they become bad, we actually able to protect our customer. So one of the key points here is basically, if you look at it, if you have the DNS threat detection response, we actually able to block 75% of this domain were blocked before, all right, the campaign started, all right, before the security advisory. So this is where most of our customers were protected. Basically, we're able to stop all these, users actually accessing to this particular website, and we were able to block it in way much advance. So this is one of the key benefit if you look at it from a DNS detection response, because you have the intelligence, you have the capability, and basically to have all this information to allow you to have all this visibility and context as well. All right. All right, so another example I just want to share with you. I think this is recently published by Infoblox Threat Intelligence team back in April. So this is one of the latest findings we have. As you can see, if you go to our main website, to Infoblox, you look under the threat intelligence, you can see there's a lot of publication we have been published. One of the things that as the Infoblox, as a protective, as a DNS vendor, security vendor, we constantly proactively look for all these threats and we publish them. All right, and this is one of the unique differentiator that we provide. Basically, to continuously looking using the threat hunting capability to look for new threats within our infrastructure and basically helping customers to protect. All right, and for this particular case, basically we saw what we call a beacon. DNS beacon, a C2 DNS beacon, actually connecting to Russia, basically, using a C2 infrastructure. And this particular DNS beacon was a low profile and hard to discover, and they're actually using a basically remote access Trojan, and we call it decoy down. And one of the key points here is basically we are able to find this proactively using the DNS query. So because we have this intelligence, basically the idea of using a threat hunting, DNS threat hunting, we are able to detect all these anomalies at a very early stage. All right, and we actually use the IPAM data to determine who and what made the query. All right. And one of the interesting thing, if you look at the publication on the white paper on this particular article, is that particular attack doesn't come from the end user devices, but actually come from the network security devices. So this is where we can able to pinpoint exactly which are the devices actually making this connection and where exactly it's located, and helping our customers to investigate that further as well. And again, this is some of the key points. I think basically when I talk about the suspicious domain, all right, this is where we are able to detect at the very early stage, typically at the pre-campaign, when we set up this infrastructure to run a pre-campaign. So basically, if you see something suspicious at a very early stage, we look at the behavior, we look at the pattern, we look at the how it's been used. Basically, we can actually put them into a suspicious feed, and essentially we can provide the protection when it becomes malicious. All right. Extending to that as well, I think we also able to provide application control. So if you if the organization looking to protect or to allow certain type of application, maybe a high risk application or unsanctioned application within the environment, so you can actually use DNS as well. For example, there are some organizations do not want to allow to use a personal cloud storage or any type of remote connectivity, or maybe a social networking application. So you can actually use DNS to control those or limit at least the attack surface using an unsanctioned application within the environment as well. Okay. All right. So the next part, I just want to share with you some of the unique offering. I think I spoke about how DNS detection response help to provide detection and how to provide prevention. And I also talk about in terms how we can enable our security operations, right? Oftentimes DNS always in a lot of organizations managed by network team, right? So this is where we can also empower the security team to provide this information, whereby the way Infoblox are positioned today are very unique, because we also not only do DNS, we also do GCP, we do IPAM, and using this data, we can actually synchronize and provide you an actionable context in terms of who are the user, who are the devices, actually, going to all this particular website or going to this particular location. All right. One of the things that we see, some of the challenges when it comes to visibility, I think most of the solution when it comes to to have context, I think plays a very important part. A lot of time you can see a solution like firewall, it provides you the information, for example, what is the type of the threat you see. For example, we can see it's a spyware, we can see the threat name, we can see what is the action, but typically the challenge is, for example, if I see an IP address today, those IP address actually comes from a DNS server. You do not have the client IP. So oftentimes if you see these IP addresses, how do you investigate who are the user actually accessing to this particular URL? All right, so this is where it kind of makes the security operation life difficult, because this is where you spend a lot of time going back to DNS log to look for this information. All right. And what if you can help with this area as well? So this is where we provide visibility and context using our IPAM data. All right. So versus what you see in an IP address today, we actually can help to provide security team information such as what is the threat level, what is the security event they see. Apart from a source IP, we can also provide a MAC ID. We can provide a username, who are the users, what is the mission we see. and with the location, right? So this is where you have to prioritize. I think if I go back to the previous slide, I think some of the challenges we see, for example, if I see an IP address here, is basically how do you identify this is a client IP versus your printer, or whether it's from a guest network IP. So this is where it kind of doesn't give you a lot of context here to investigate. So if you have this information that kind of provide you the the data that you can help to mitigate. And if you remember my slide earlier, I mentioned about one of the most important resources we have during a security incident is time. So this is where it cuts down the time where you need few hours to few days to find this information to few minutes. All right. So this is where we can actually provide all this information quick and easy, and essentially helps the security team to help them to to contain or to mitigate this incident much faster. All right. Some of the examples from the DDI context, how Infoblox provide the unique differentiator is basically not only from the DDI, from networking perspective, even we provide this information, we can synchronize with our DNS security. So in the event this is something that triggers up, we can provide what is the host name, we can provide a MAC address, we can put the data from our DSCP, we can also see who the user, so that allows you to understand whether this is user from which department, we can provide information from which location, whether this is IT devices, whether it's from managed devices or unmanaged devices. So essentially helps the security team to mitigate this incidents much faster. All right. All right, so in terms of how DDI data plays in SecOps, I think based on the studies that was done in 2001, you can see, those threat investigation and the green line. Basically, those are without the DDI data. And you can see a significant improvement with the DDI data. So basically, you can see a couple of areas that provide a lot of benefit to SecOps, basically with the combination of the DDI data into the investigation. Basically, it improves a few areas. For example, we have early detection and reconnaissance. We can see improvement in initial compromise. We also see command control detection get much faster, lateral movement, and most importantly, data exfiltration. So this is where you can see when you have the DDI lock, it helps in terms of providing much benefit to security teams in order to empower them to quickly to mitigate or to act on all these incidents. All right. All right, so with that, I just want to come to a last page, basically to give you a quick summary in terms of some of the key benefits from a DNS perspective. I think the key thing from a DNS detection response is basically how we can use the existing DNS infrastructure and basically to turn them into a protective DNS. All right, some of the key benefits, like I mentioned, is we can do DNS query mapped to user devices using IPAM data. So essentially, this helps security team to identify the devices, the user, a much more efficient way rather than taking few days, take about few minutes to identify all this information. And we can also do application discovery. So we can not only we can track DNS requests, we can also track all the application that are going through your environment. From a protective DNS perspective, I think some of the key capabilities, not just looking at phishing, ransomware, malware, we also provide protection against domain generation algorithm. One of the techniques being used, for example, to send a payload or malware to your environment, so we can use our machine learning capability to detect that. Most importantly, we also can reduce the exposure of data exfiltration. Using DNS, we have seen a lot of cases where data exfiltration happen over DNS, so we can also reduce some of the data breach exposure on the DNS protocol as well. We can protect any system. So, a lot of challenges we see in the environment, where OT and IT devices, you can't really install an agent. So basically you can provide any protection, or if you have any type of devices that you can't really put an EDR solution or protection against this on these appliances or devices, basically you can use DNS as a protective layer, because that's universal, that basically every devices need to connect to DNS before they goes out to resources. So we can actually use that to provide a layer of protection to all these devices wherever they are in the network. All right. And then in terms of detection, basically, this is where we can provide intelligence. All right. So this is a very important part, because today you already have a DNS server. Adding a threat intelligence analytics, basically helps to detect, some of the suspicious domain, some of the emergent domain that we can detect, and then using machine learning analytics basically help us to detect different type of threat, for example, tunneling, DGA, data exfiltration. And of course, lookalike domain detection also very helpful because we have seen a lot of key benefits. For example, someone tried to impersonate your digital asset in your environment. So essentially, if someone trying to do a phishing campaign to your customers or even to your internal user, you have the advantage basically to have all this information, and then basically before it happens, and basically you can prevent that from user actually going into this phishing email as well. And lastly, automation. I think this is where we kind of bring in the networking and security team together, essentially by providing automation. As I mentioned, one of the key challenges we have seen, a lot of the security tool does not provide a lot of automation, doesn't provide a lot of integration. So this is where, from Infoblox, our solution, we provide a very vast of integration automation. So this essentially, if we can use a REST API to share this data to whether to a networking team or to other security solution within your environment, whether it's a firewall, SIEM, the orchestration, so we can send all this data to do a trust or a collaboration. All right. So with that, I will end the session. I think we do have feedback. I think basically we have a watch to give away. But you wanna give some coverage on here as well?
Yeah. We just need your feedback based on Vikram's presentation. So just scan the QR code, the screen, and we will be providing you 500 worth of Grab voucher once we receive your feedback. So hopefully, can we make it bigger so that they can scan it properly, or is it?
This is my full screen actually, so.
Okay, yeah. So
I can try.
yeah.
Give me a second. I can try.
Yeah, maybe you can make it bigger so that they can scan it.
Is it better? Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe Miss Len, can you try if it's working?
Send na lang ma'am sa Facebook page para ko.
Okay.
Nila.
Yeah.
Attach ko doon.
All right. So yeah, we would like to thank PICSPro again for letting us present for today's Kwentuhang Cybersecurity.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure po to have Infoblox with us, especially in our advocacy. So before we, of course, release Vic, because this is once in a lifetime, not once in a lifetime, but because we know how busy you are there at Infoblox. So can we ask a few questions about the discussion that,
Sure.
that you had? So
Sure.
basically, way back 2-3 years ago, the working environment that we have here in the country, the Philippines, we shifted from the regular office work to the work from home setup. So how did that particular change in the working environment affect the way we utilize DNS, especially with the influx of the cyber attacks that we had over the years?
Good question. So I think the changes that I mentioned, before even for COVID, I think before we have the working from home, typically most of these users are working from office where they have perimeters protection, whether it's a firewall or everything. So now with the users are working remotely, working in distributed environments, so it becomes challenging because it opens up the attack surface. Because when you're working from home, you don't have the company firewall to protect you. Regularly, you have VPN to access the application, but the asset itself is exposed to a lot of whether it's a phishing campaign, whether to different type of malware, even not secure Wi-Fi. So basically, there's a lot of challenges there. So this is where it's important in the sense that from DNS perspective, you can see, like I said on one of my slides, it's actually closest to the endpoint, right? So basically, when you have a protected DNS, we can actually observe all these different type of behavior, whether users are accessing or whether this asset or machine are going to a bad website. So essentially, this can help us to stop. We can prevent. In fact, one of the use cases I think from our customer we have before, they have an EDR solution, and basically some of these solutions they're not able to detect some of the zero-day vulnerability. And with the DNS detection response, we were able to provide those additional layer All right. So if it's just they are going to some bad websites or suspicious domain, we can actually help our organization based on this, whatever the logs that we see. We can be more proactively to block it. All right. We can stop them from going there, or whether they accidentally click on the phishing email, we can stop it. So essentially, whether users are working from the office, working remotely, that layer, additional layer of DNS can actually provide, kind of layer to protect the machine or asset, and kind of enables the employee to be more productive without worrying, they're clicking something bad or accessing something bad. I hope I answered that question.
Yes, sir. But was it really challenging? Because on the old setup, office setup that we have, of course, all the systems are there. So monitoring
Yep.
would be easier. But however, since we are working remotely, so there is an uneven distribution of course, the users in terms of proximity and location. Was it hard? Especially you are mentioning about the detecting, the detecting, the preventing, and the uniting aspect of the DNS. Was it a challenging on your part?
It's I would say no, because the flexibility from Infoblox, I mean, at least for Infoblox customers, we provide the flexibility in terms of the deployment option. Basically, we have on-prem solution, we have hybrid solution, and we have cloud, right? So in those contexts, users working from remotely, we actually can offer hybrid, or they can use our cloud, solution. We have a solution called Blocks on Threat Defense, basically sits on the cloud. So essentially, any devices anywhere in the world, when I open up a website, you can actually go to our cloud DNS. Basically, that's for the first layer. So essentially, before you go to actual resources on the internet, we can actually scan those, requests, queries before it goes to the resources anywhere in the world. So basically, we have the flexibility in terms of how we want to deploy this. So, they can be hybrid or it can be a full cloud.
Actually, if there's one thing that I think the pandemic taught us, it actually made us more aware on the importance of cybersecurity. That's why technology has paved the way for several innovations, especially with the utilization of DNS. A while ago, you were mentioning, Sir Vic, about how AI actually capacitated the Infoblox technology as regards to the utilization of DNS. There is this particular notion among, I don't know if it's just the Filipinos, but among the netizens today that AI is for cybersecurity professionals like us. Should we be threatened by AI, or should we rely our cybersecurity needs to AI, and how does AI complement our work, especially with DNS?
Yeah, so I think with the AI, basically it helps to accomplish stuff. It's not really replacing jobs or replacing anybody, but I think I look at the AI from the positive side. Basically, it enables us to accomplish certain tasks much faster. All right. For example, in the context of DNS, basically using AI, we can do predictive analysis. For example, if I see a website going to Russia, all right, and if I see this website, it's not been active for the last 2 years, all right, and nobody accessing this is not the major website, not a popular website. Suddenly, I can see you 1 or 2 connection, and this is where the AI will start looking at different type of contacts. All right, what is the in terms of frequency? What is the type of URL? Who are the actually registrar? So when you put all this different type of information, the AI can actually help us to reduce the work time, right? The time that takes a normal human actually to analyze this maybe take a few weeks or months. With the AI, basically helps us to do it within minutes, right? So they help us to react to threats much faster. So basically, if this is something suspicious using AI, we can actually put it in suspicious domain, and that essentially before the campaign or intent to attack, and essentially help us to stop it before it happens. So I do see a positive side. AI can help us to move things faster, all right, and then essentially help us to react, a lot more quicker.
That is actually a very good point, Sir Vic, that the AI is not there to threaten us with our position, because the need for cybersecurity professionals is perpetual, I may say, because technology is perpetual as we speak. But rather, it saves us time and, again, the effort especially with the kind of job that we are employing in terms of cybersecurity. So that's a very good point coming from professionals like you. So are there any other things that you want to say to our audience as regards to the DNS and how Infoblox is actually boosting our capabilities of protecting our systems, our network, because of this technology?
Yeah, so I think in a nutshell, I think a lot of misconception in terms of a lot of customer, don't see value. I think DNS, like I said, it's been there historically for 40 years. Today, if I ask any of you, you're not using DNS in network, is it most impossible? Everybody uses DNS. So essentially how we can actually use the existing infrastructure, because that's the easiest way to implement. You don't need any re-architecture. Basically, you don't have to change things. Basically, just use the existing infrastructure and enable the DNS to have threat intelligence using the AI and machine learning to provide you a protective DNS. Basically, the protective DNS is to provide an additional layer of defense in-depth strategy. So essentially, that allows you to reduce your exposure, data breaches, help you to be more productive and be more efficient, right? So obviously, there are a lot of benefit even from our existing customers. And if you're interested, what you hear, if you need more information, some of the, we have, tools, for example, like a data exfiltration tool. So if you wanted to check how effective your current solution or how effective your current security solution against someone stealing data using DNS. So we have all these tools available. You can reach out to Bats. Basically, she can help you to arrange a demo. I'm happy then to run the demo to you. And if you need more information, feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to take the discussion a bit more to the next level.
Okay, that's good to hear, Sir Vic. And once again, we thank the team Infoblox, Miss Christina, Miss Bads, as always. Thank you very much, Sir Vic, for sharing your expertise with us today. Thank you very much. So before we call it a day, we would like to give a big shout out to our regular followers and
Thank you.
viewers. Thank you, Miss Christina, as always. To Sir Darwin Tejero, Sir Frederick Gonda, Mr. Tristan Ligunha, Mac natin. Thank you always. And Miss Bats, for other information about Infoblox, I believe you can share with us your social media websites, social media platforms, so that the audience who are interested to pursue a deeper knowledge about this topic could actually look for other information aside from this for our Kwentuhang Cybersecurity episode for today.
Yeah, so I think we have Infoblox in Facebook and also in LinkedIn. So, and maybe I can share with you na lang our email also, so that you can also post it in PICSPro.
Yes, and soon enough po, we will be having another partnership with them, training,
Yep.
hopefully po,
Mhm.
because we share the same advocacy in terms of cybersecurity education and awareness. So we will
Yeah.
see more of Infoblox in the coming days. So maraming salamat, Ms. Bot.
Definitely. Thank you so much, PICSPro,
Yes.
and thank you.
We're looking forward for another fruitful episode of Kwentuhang Cybersecurity with you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
all. So to our audience, yes, thank you very much, Team Infoblox. Please watch out for our other activities in the purview of cybersecurity education and awareness. So aside from Infoblox, we are also teaming up with our other tech partners. So makikita niyo pa sila at marami pa tayong mga pagkukwentuhan at pagsasamahan when it comes to cybersecurity education. So muli po maraming salamat sa ating mga avid watchers, avid followers, avid listeners. Soon enough, hopefully magkaroon din tayo ng platform for our podcast. At maraming salamat sa walang sawang suporta sa atin. Hopefully, we will grow in numbers in terms of the advocacy at makita natin na lahat ay cyber secure, cyber safe, cyber aware, and cyber educated. And Miss Len, ready ka na ba?
Go na.
Go na. So 2 minutes more. Maraming salamat sa inyo mga ka-PICSPro. Hopefully, we will see you again. Yes, definitely, we will see you again. Watch out for our incoming trainings. Huwag po kayo magsawang patuloy na sumubaybay sa ating mga social media platforms. Please wait for our further announcement. Together with Infoblox, definitely makakasama pa natin sila sa iba pa nating venture aside from Kwentuhang Cybersecurity. And our other announcement, magkakaroon po tayo ng info drive sa susunod na mga araw, you watch that out. School tours as well as roadshow. So maraming salamat. Because dito sa amin, sa cybersecurity, Ms. Len,
Happy
happy lang.
Happy
Again,
lang.
happy lang kapag wala.
Walang weekend.
Bye.
Bye-bye, guys.
Maraming salamat.
Bye.
Ah,
Thank you.
see ya.
Get
Oh,
safe.
thank you.
Maraming salamat yung Infoblox.